Judge Robert Holdman, class of 1982, 86 Fordham undergrad, 91 Fordham Law. What an honor to sit here and talk to you today. Thank you so much.
And I remember him asking me, he goes, I understand you played football. And I said, yes, sir. And he goes, do you remember the refs? And I said, I remember a couple of bad ones. And he goes, don't be remembered as a judge. Wow. And I look at him and he goes, just do what you're supposed to do. It's not about you. He was a really good judge, it's like a really good ref. You shouldn't get noticed. And I took that and it kind of sunk in. I'm like, he's absolutely right. If you make it about you, then it should be about what happened. It should be about the facts. It should be about whether the law is applied correctly. It shouldn't be about your ego or what you want to see happen. And I tried to hold on to that.
Hello and welcome back to Alumni Stories, the podcast. We are here for a very special episode 3 of Alumni Stories, the podcast. My name is Peter Kennedy, Director of Alumni Affairs, class of 2012, and we are joined by another very special guest. We have class of 1982 here, Monsignor Farrell, class of 1986 at Fordham University undergraduate, and then law school at Fordham University as well, class of 1991. That just scratches the surface of some of the amazing things that you've accomplished in your career that we will talk a lot about, because you have a very esteemed career. Congratulations on all your success. But I want to start off by saying thank you for being here first and foremost. I would say welcome back, but it feels like you kind of never left, because you've been here since graduation, supporting the football program, supporting this place, doing speeches, keynote speaker at graduation, talking to students and teams year over year. So welcome back, but great to have you all these years still be here.
Oh, thank you. It is, it's home. And I recently just, timed out of the board. So I was on the original board, which was, about 15 years ago. And to your point about never leaving, I live in Westchester, and I'll never forget when I had the honor of being asked to be on that first board. I was walking out the door, and my son, who is 18 now, was about 3 years old. Wow. And my wife looks at me as I'm leaving for the first board meeting, and she said, you're going to drive an hour and a half to sit in a meeting that's an hour and a half, to drive home an hour and a half or 2 hours at that point. And she goes, and you know our son can't go to Farrell, that we live too far away. I said, I do. And she goes, well, then why are you doing it? And she goes, I don't get it. And I go, you didn't go to Farrell.
Right.
That's why you don't get it.
Now, let me ask this, if not to be invasive, but from Staten Island or from elsewhere in the tri-state, or where is she from?
Oh, she's from, she grew up about as far out in Long Island as you can get on the North Fork. So it almost looks like Ireland there. Her parents actually immigrated from Ireland in their 20s, and they found an area. And then, like I said, the North Fork, it's called Southold, and it's just an absolutely beautiful, it kind of looks like Ireland. Yeah. And that's where she grew up, in a very rural area.
I just made my first trek to the North Fork, actually, this summer for a wedding, and it was quite a beautiful place. And got some great wine while I was there. But that makes sense, because my wife also not from Staten Island, and same concepts, right? Like, I'm going to a football game on a Friday night. You're driving an hour from we live in Jersey, to go to I am. But now I work here, but this is before that. What are you doing? Yeah, no, you can't get away from this place.
So where I live now is a town called Bronxville in lower Westchester, and there is a incredibly high concentration of Fordham Prep alum. And my son just graduated Fordham Prep. My youngest is starting his freshman year at Fordham Prep, and I absolutely love the place. It reminds me so much of Farrell and the brotherhood, the community, the alumni involvement. But my friends up there, like when I first moved up there, they're all chatting things up, and they talking about whatever this game or that game. And I remember meeting a guy I had not met before, and he goes, Bobby, where did you go to high school? And I said, I went to Monsignor Farrell. And you see literally 3 or 4 of them go, oh. And I'm like, oh, you lost to us as well?
Did we take care of business against you guys?
And one of my friends actually calls Farrell the evil empire. In a loving way, but it does.
It's almost the ultimate sign of respect.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it was, so my kids grew up swaddled in Farrell gear and Fordham University gear, because I played football there. And So they all know it, and so as they were getting older and they're kind of being indoctrinated into the Fordham prep kind of world, they finally, when my son went there and he was a basketball player, he said, "Who are you going to root for?" And I said, "You're in the uniform."
Right.
I said, "If you're in the uniform, then of course I'm rooting for my son." But the best scenario of the 4 years he spent at Fordham Prep was his sophomore year, when the freshman team at Farrell beat the freshman team at Fordham Prep, so I was happy. Mm-hmm. Fordham Prep JV, led by my son's 15, beat the Farrell JV team, and then the Fordham Prep varsity lost to the Farrell. So I'm like, perfect world. My son was the leading scorer, and he won his game, but Farrell won the other two.
There you go. Yeah. That's like Judge Holdman Day. That's a special day for you.
Yes.
You get to check off all the boxes on that one.
He was not happy about it. But.
Well, fair enough. But again, Judge Holdman here, class of 1982, and the career from Farrell and Fordham beyond really goes a special way. And we'll talk about your time in the New York State Supreme Court. We'll talk about all the work that you've done across the world, really doing speeches and lectures and teaching people about law and ethics, making the right choices, if you will. But I want to start here. Start in your time at Farrell, and first about your time, what you're doing here today as well, because you're here once again talking to me, talking to the Alumni Stories podcast, but you'll have a chance in a little while to talk to the football team yet again, which is something that you do every year. Why is something like that so important to you that you make the time in your life to get down here and talk to that team and at this school specifically?
Honestly, because, and I've said this before, there is nothing in my life outside of my parents that have had a stronger impact upon me and my direction in my life, growing up until I became an adult than Farrell. And a large part of that was my experience with the football team and Coach Barrett and my teammates. In fact, today is September 8th, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
This Friday, for the 39th year in a row, I am meeting between 15 and 26, depending on the night, either Friday or Saturday, of my Farrell brethren at a golf outing upstate. And we hack it up on the golf course and barbecue and tell the same old silly stories and make fun of each other like we did when we were 17. Mm-hmm. And it is literally the 39th year in a row that we're doing it.
That's incredible.
And they're my brothers. And so the impact, and it's grown, believe it or not, over the last couple of years. Last year there were two guys there that we graduated with that we hadn't seen in forever, and one of them ran into them, and he said, "Yeah, I'd love to go." And it was like we were 17 years old. So the impact that this school, and I was lucky enough to have the double blessing of going here and playing football here, had such an immediate impact that I would love to be able to help in any way that I can. If I can strike a chord with one kid or two kids and help somebody out, then I'm, I guess, giving back somewhat, right. Or trying to anyway. Mm-hmm. I could never give back to everything that Farrell has meant for me, but I could try. Mm. I actually emailed Lou the other day, and I said I got the greatest email. It was from a young man who graduated Farrell, and he was starting law school the next day, and I had first met him here through Lou. He stuck with it and kept in contact with me, and I guided him along and working, going in the process to go into law school. Mm. And then he sent me the nicest email saying, "I just want you to know I start law school tomorrow," and he goes, "I don't think I'd be there without you." Wow. And which is not true, but it's nice that he feels that way, and he's nice that he's showing gratitude, and that's what you want. Like, one of the things this place taught me, and I guess you realize it as you get older, like someone like Coach Barrett and Monsignor Finn and some of the legends that were here, like Mr. Musanti and Mr. Bez was here when I was here, is it's one thing to be a mentor. Mm. And it's one thing to try and help somebody and to help lead someone. But what I think Farrell does is that they not only provide you with they teach you how to be a mentor. Like I said, it's one thing to be a mentor. It's another to learn how to do it the right way. Mm. And I think Farrell does that, at least it did in my experience. It kind of teaches you, because I look at the people that were my mentors, and you try to do what they did.
Right.
So.
And if you walk through campus now, and a lot of people listening at home or wherever they are may have not been on campus in a while, but if you haven't been on campus, you walk through halls and you'll see signage, and it'll say, the Vir Fidelis does the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Your Vir Fidelis 24/7, 365 a year. And those are the concepts that you're kind of speaking about. It's not about being the mentor just to say you were a mentor. It's about actually doing those actions and affecting those people. And obviously you've done that in droves so far in your time coming back to this place. And now you're doing something a little different here soon as well. And now not just talking to the students, but you're talking to parents as well. Have you done that here before too, or is this a new twist on some of your expertise?
You know, I have done, not at Farrell.
Okay.
I did it. I give a speech at Fordham University to the football team on the first day of camp every year, and it's a very similar toned speech. And then one year, the head coach said, "I think I'd like you to talk to at least the freshman parents." Because, you know, it's a little bit of a different twist. You're dropping your kids off for the first time. Right. And so it got a great reception, and not because of me, but because they couldn't be more grateful of just being enlightened on some things, just about the campus, about the Bronx, about New York City. If they're, you know, you get kids recruited from all over the country. So it kind of, you know, you kind of think that maybe we're giving you a little bit of comfort. So I've given some variation of this lecture, which has taken different iterations of form, but basically it's about choices and not allowing someone else to make them for you. You know, because you could always be doing the right thing, but sometimes the right situation is, you know, it doesn't present itself. Sometimes you're put in a bad situation and you have to try to make the best of it. And that's the message I try to talk to them about, making the right choices on who to be with and who not to be with. And I've given it, I honestly don't know how many times I've given it to, probably, I would say about 7 or 8 high schools, 7 or 8 universities and the sports teams at the universities, and actually professional football. We talked to the Giants years ago, and it's just different levels of, you know, you twist it a little bit to who you're talking to, but it's all the same thing. It's not letting other people make wrong choices for you.
Right. And you know, you spend time on the Supreme Court in Brooklyn, Bronx, Westchester, obviously dealing with cases that are much wider ranges, hopefully, of any of the people you're talking to are going to deal with, right? You dealt with cases that are much more intense or dangerous, or I don't know if the word unfortunate makes sense in that regard. Hopefully these students and parents don't have to deal with some of the stuff that you had to work on very specifically. However, the knowledge is power in that case, and you're providing that knowledge.
And you're right, and you're right. The hope is that they don't, but unfortunately sometimes it presents that way. Right. I tell the story of trying to convince kids, don't get into a fight, because it could, whatever it is that you think will happen in those couple of seconds, and however gratifying it may be, and how much of a loudmouth that person may be, the price you're going to pay for a long, long time could be tremendous.
Right.
So you send those messages about the perils and terrors of going to prison or going to jail and being arrested and seeing your entire future. And if you are here, then you're starting at a really good place.
Right.
And you're fortunate to be here. It's a blessing, but it's also a burden for you to carry that. In other words, you have a responsibility. And you can bet that if something bad happens, that article, that news clip might say, a Farrell student, that whatever it may be.
Right.
And I said that's the blessing and the burden of going to a place with this kind of reputation. You will, sad to say, it's reality, people who like to see that.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, sharing that, like when I was a prosecutor in the Bronx for 14 years before I was on the bench. So yeah, I've kind of seen it all, and you have to share some of those stories,
right,
to try and get the message across.
It makes a ton of sense, right? If they can hear, like you said, one thing, one person can hear one thing that can help them get on the right track. That's why you're doing it, right? That's the whole reason behind it all. But let's keep moving through this career now, because I love the Farrell to Fordham. Obviously, that path means a lot to you. You care deeply about this place. You care deeply about Fordham. You loved the undergrad so much. You stayed there for the law school. So you spent a lot of time up there. And now you just said your son graduated. Congratulations to him. Now he's there for undergrad as well. Just started.
He is. The brainwashing worked, and and I actually.
And the color schemes are similar enough too that some of the gear passes.
Quite frankly, when I went to Fordham, it kind of shows how old I am. They were still maroon and gold.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, they changed in like the 90s, late 80s. But I was president of, and I'm actually president emeritus of what's called the Fordham Gridiron Club, which is football alumni, and we remain, very active. My kids have been going to the football games and basketball games, since they were in a carriage.
Right.
And it means a lot. My wife, although I didn't know her there because I'm a bit older than she, but she also is a Fordham grad.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
So let me ask, the question I was getting to is how did your time here lead you there? So what led you to Fordham? I know you played football there. Obviously the academics speak for itself at Fordham University. What got you there, and is it a path that you really sought out when you were a student here at Farrell, or did it kind of find you in a way?
There's a funny twist to it. So going through recruiting as a senior, you do the different visits and you talk to the different schools and you mill the different opportunities and offers that you get. And I remember I had narrowed it down, and I was looking at a number of different schools, and there was one Farrell grad who was at Fordham and playing football, so he was pushing me as well. And at that time, the incredible Father Gannon was the head guidance counselor, and I went into his office, and I won't use the name of the school out of respect, but I said, Father, Fordham has offered me this much money. I said, but they didn't offer me a work study yet. I said, the work studies means it's $1,200. I said, but this school offered me everything and the $1,200 work study. And he looked at me and he goes, Bob, Farrell is far more than $1,200 a better school than that school. And I said, yeah. I said, I was hoping you'd say that. And he goes, absolutely. I didn't know till about a month later that Father Gannon was a Fordham grad.
Oh, wow.
So I think he was kind of influencing me. I mean, he was right.
Yes.
But I remember seeing him later. I'm like, you didn't tell me you went to Fordham. And he laughed.
So that story in itself is a little bit of a lesson, especially to like younger people if they're watching this, current students if they're watching this, right? Like that little payoff in the time sounded probably large to you. Oh, $1,200, that's going to be a big difference for me, XYZ, through these semesters through college. But down the road, that $1,200 is not as big of a deal when you get the Fordham education, the Fordham connections, the law school track that you then went on. $1,200 work study program didn't make the big difference for you to change your decision on.
And I never confirmed it, but I did get the work study.
Yeah.
At Fordham, and as I understand it, Father Gannon might have had something to do with it.
A couple phone calls, maybe a letter.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, that's a great story, and sometimes with the success stories you hear, some people have those moments in life where they're 8 years old and they know exactly what they want to be and they achieve that. Some people don't figure out what they want to do until later. So for you, even entering Fordham, did you know law was in your future? Was it a goal of yours, or is that something that you figured out on your path?
I think I might have shown interest. I had an aunt who went to college as an adult, but I was kind of the first person in my family to go. I'm the very proud son of a New York City fireman, but no one from my family had gone to college. So it was a new frontier for all of us.
Right.
Coming through Farrell and starting to get an education, getting a little bit more worldly education, I started, being an attorney appealed to me, and then a little bit more so. And in fact, when I was in undergrad, I worked for an attorney like second semester, I think my either freshman or sophomore year. I was able to steal some time and go work for this guy 1 or 2 days a week, and he was the president of the Bronx Bar Association, so he was a very active guy, and I got to go to court with him, and So that really really sparked it even more. And then as as time progressed, I'm like, yeah, I think I want to. So when I graduated, I actually worked for a year, and because I wanted to do really well on the LSAT, which I had taken at one point, either my junior or senior year, and just did not do well at all. And part of it was because I didn't put the time in needed. And so I worked for a year. I got a job, like what you would call a regular job out of graduation, and but I put in the hours and took a course, and I did well enough on the LSAT where I was incredibly lucky to get into Fordham Law School, so I started the following year.
Wow. Now I'm sure that experience kind of strengthened you a little bit as well, right? Because at that point, I'm sure you were successful here. Well, I'm not sure. I know you were successful here at Farrell because you got to Fordham, and obviously at Fordham you finished there, so you were doing well enough there. What was it like for you to see that LSAT score, the fact that it wasn't up to the standard for you to get into Fordham? Did that help you in any way? Did it help shape you or inspire you to keep going and keep pushing?
Well, honestly, if you even go back a bit, coming to Farrell was, I remember, I literally still have the letter I received for my acceptance to Farrell. I have it in a box.
Wow. Because
it was everything to me, and it was the gold standard. And when I was coming out of Farrell, if you had asked me at one point in time, I wanted to go to the University of Pennsylvania. And I was being recruited, and my grades were right there, just on the borderline. And I look back on it, and as great a school it is, I'm so glad I didn't go because of the experience I had at Farrell. The experience I had at Fordham. But going into law school, that LSAT story, if I can bore you with the details, the first time I took the test, at that time, the LSAT was, the highest you can get was a 48, which is a very arbitrary number. But so I scored a 29 the first time I took it, which is like getting a 900 on your SAT. It was
not Fordham law level.
No.
Right.
And then I was able to get an interview with Fordham Law's committee with my grades and with that LSAT, and they said, listen, you're taking it again, not gonna lie to you, a lot rides on that LSAT. And I actually worked extremely hard, studied for it, and I scored in the top 5% on the exam nationally, and to the point where I got investigated. I actually had to, the LSAC is down in Princeton, the standard where they do the standardized test. I had to drive down there to get fingerprinted.
No way.
Because the disparity in my scores.
There's no way you got this much better.
Yeah, it's exactly what it was. They said, we're questioning whether it was you or how they phrased it. So I had to go down and get re-fingerprinted to make sure they matched from the other two tests. And so getting into Fordham Law was like getting into Farrell. It was, holy cow. Incredibly lucky, incredibly blessed to do it.
And now when you give advice to, aspiring lawyers who are on that pre-law track, or they have the major that they want to try to get to the law school they want, what is your advice to them now? Because obviously things change over time, but the basis is still the basis. You need to take the prereqs, you got to get a good score, you got to have good extracurriculars. So what's your advice to young lawyers or young aspiring lawyers who reach out to you for some help?
I just had a phone call yesterday with a young woman who wants to go to law school, and she's incredibly talented. She got a 3.8, I think, at Richmond, or a really good school, and she's tried every single thing, but her LSAT right now is not where it's not where it should be for where she wants to go to law school.
Right.
And my recommendation with her is to take it again, take a year off, or not a year off, work for a year, and retake it. And it sounds blunt, but law school is kind of the last bastion of, it's a beauty contest. This is your LSAT, this is your GPA. Are there other factors? Sure.
Right.
But I think in undergrad, there's more of those other factors, right? There's other things that could influence your acceptance to a university than there are at the law school.
You're not getting into law school because you're a great offensive lineman.
Bingo.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, there's
Right.
no other outside force that could shoot you up a rank that maybe you wouldn't have been in.
Right. And it is harder. Like people say, oh, if you know an alum, or can you do a letter of recommendation? It is harder for an alum of a law school to kind of put their thumb on the scale, or you could put it in good word.
Right.
And you could, advocate for someone, and it can be helpful, but it is far harder to do than at the undergrad level.
Right.
At least in my experience.
I mean, I imagine just based off pure numbers, right? Like the amount of people that are in law school don't usually touch the numbers of undergraduate. So if one guy goes into undergraduate and they fall through the cracks, they fall through the cracks. At law school, there's only so many seats, and every seat is valued to a really high level. So it makes sense in that way. But that advice, you hear that a lot with stories for medical school, for law school, that it didn't click right away. And I think that advice that some people in high school, they really need that, because a lot of young students are perfectionists and they're used to the 4.0. They're used to the 100 on every test. They get upset.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, I only got a 97. What happened? You must have graded it. You got a 97, right? But sometimes you need that time to kind of get back on the right track and get inspired again.
Yeah, and then one of the, it's that old expression, if you want to make God laugh, make plans, right? So sometimes it's not going to go the way you plan it out to be, and hopefully you'll end up and you'll learn from it. But it can be humbling, to say the least, to go through that process. So you keeping your options open.
And now, when you're in law school, obviously you take classes of all different breadths of law. You ended up heavily in the ethics space, obviously serving time in the courts for a long time. How did you find that path for yourself? Which way, or how did law school or being in New York, being at Fordham, lead you down that way?
When I was in law school, I was, again, very, very lucky. I worked for the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District, and I was assigned to, it was a pretty famous case, at least at the time. It was the government versus Adnan Khashoggi, who was an attaché to Iran, and Imelda Marcos, who was the president of the Philippines, or the wife of the president of the Philippines, and they were being criminally prosecuted, and I worked for the government. And I was in the courtroom every day, and it was an amazing experience. And then from there, I got a summer job with a Fordham Law graduate named Tom Fitzpatrick, and I was introduced to him through a dear friend of mine in law school, because she had done it the summer before. And I had talked about the influence of your family, my parents and Coach Barrett, Mr. Fitzpatrick, Tom, probably in that top 3 of most influential people, the top 4 influential people in my life. And he was he still is, he's just an amazing individual, the way he taught you how to be a lawyer. And he was incredibly well-liked, yet incredibly successful, which you don't always find in the law.
Right.
And the lessons I learned from him in law school really, I took life lessons from him, let alone did it inspire me to become an attorney and a prosecutor in the beginning. He said, and he guided me. He said, listen, he goes, you'll do what I do someday. You'll work in the private sector if you wish. He goes, but you should start in the government and learn how to do it right. And that's what I did. I left law school and took a position with the Bronx District Attorney's Office in 1991.
Yeah, and then many years, 14 years you said there, and then into Brooklyn, into Westchester. When you get that judge nomenclature, if you will, when you get that title of judge, what was that like for you? And how long was that carrot in front of you, until you got there?
Well, I worked in the Bronx District Attorney's Office for 14 years, and for about 12 of that, a little more than 12 of that 14 years, I was in special victims. I did domestic violence, child abuse, and sex offenses. And while it is a difficult topic, every day you went to work, I had some kind of a purpose. Honestly, if Joe drug dealer is shooting Tom drug dealer, Joe drug dealer's got to be prosecuted. I get it. But it's after a couple of those, it's just was not it would not have been, because I didn't do those cases, but it would not have been as inspiring to me to go to work every single day as when, a 3-year-old boy is shot or beaten, or a 5-year-old girl is raped, or a woman is raped and murdered or beaten by her spouse. Like every day I had the opportunity to speak for people who couldn't speak for themselves.
Wow.
And that was incredibly rewarding. And you asked me, the question was, how long was the carrot of being a judge? I think if you asked me a year before I became a judge, do you have any desire to be a judge? I would have said, no, I never actually thought of it.
Interesting.
I really enjoyed what I was doing, and I went through a time period where I was doing an enormous amount of child homicides, sadly, because it was where I was and when it was. It was 90s in the Bronx. And I was traveling all over the place because you're doing something that much, all of a sudden you're the expert on it because you do it more than everyone else. But some kind of, stars aligned, and I was approached by a friend who said, you should go talk to this person and see if, just think about putting your paper in. And so I went and I talked to this gentleman, and his name, and I have to give him homage because he was an enormous influence. His name was Mike Long. And Mr. Long was the head of the Conservative Party in New York State. And I remember when I met him, he said, are you a member of my party? I said, no, sir, I'm not. And he goes, are you a member of the Republican Party? And I said, no, sir, I'm not. He goes, are you a member of the Democratic Party? I said, no, sir. I said, when I turned 18, I became an independent. And he goes, all right, I can work with that. And he knew my background of working in child abuse and sex crimes, and he went to bat for me, and he was the guy who really went to bat for me with Governor Pataki for the appointment.
Yeah.
But to answer the other part of your question about how that felt, I'll never forget that I went home for the weekend, and I was to see my parents. My father gave me an envelope and said, don't open this until Monday. Monday I was starting on the bench. And I got to my chambers and literally putting on my robe for the first time as a judge. And there was a note from my pop. And it just said, when you first don the robes, just think of where you came from.
Wow.
And I was like, boom. So I still have that note as well.
Yeah, that's the one that'll hit you good every once in a while to
Sure.
think of that moment, because that's something, like you said, you're one of the first person in your family to go to college.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is an amazing accomplishment within a family. So then to take that step up one step further to go to law school, keep pushing it forward to serve as an attorney, and then to get even further as a judge, it's special for you, it's special for your entire family. I'm sure they were incredibly proud.
Right, but it's I think typical and great of my dad not saying, which he did let me know that he was proud of me, but the note was, don't forget where you're from.
Right. Yeah, true. It wasn't as straightforward, but you know what the underlying, right. No, that's amazing though. And then from 1995 to 2005, I want to make sure I get this right, you investigated or prosecuted more child homicides than any individual in the United States. And obviously you mentioned just a minute ago, obviously some of that has to do with timing and where you are, but that leads you to become an expert in the field, like you said, and you're featured on an episode of 2020, spoken to by many people in the media, consulting people in various businesses and in government. Now that, obviously that was 20 years ago where you were practicing like that, now that that time has passed, how do you still stay connected to that part of the world? Obviously, you're not practicing in that as specifically anymore, but how do you stay connected to that side of the world and still give advice to people to work the law properly in that regard, and then handle everything outside of that?
I've actually been lucky enough, and I'm so basically 3 levels of criminal laws. I've been a prosecutor, a judge, and now I'm in private practice. But I still have contact because I was the ethics and ethics officer for the Kings County District Attorney and for the New York State Protection of People with Special Needs, which is a government agency that prosecutes these cases.
Right.
Literally just 2 weeks ago, I was up in Syracuse for the New York Prosecutors Training Institute to lecture current prosecutors in New York City, in New York State, basically a refresher course, and it was on ethics and what you can and cannot do. And
right.
so I stay in contact with it, just from a different angle.
Yeah.
So I do still enjoy it. I don't get paid for it anymore, but
but people are still asking
Yeah.
a lot of questions and looking for advice,
Right.
I'm sure, in many ways. So now, what has been one of the big changes for you personally that you've switched to private sector and consulting for people? You're traveling, you do a ton of public speaking, not just here at Farrell and Fordham, but around the country, and you've gone to the Netherlands, you've gone to Sweden, you've been in South America. What has that transition been like for you, leaving the public space to private, and now you're traveling the world and sharing your knowledge?
One of the things that I have enjoyed, and it's funny because you'll see people who I was prosecutors with or judge with, and they said, "I can't believe you're on the dark side," meaning I will do criminal defense. And there is an incredible responsibility in being a defense attorney. Whether it's someone who is absolutely guilty and done some horrific acts, or someone who's falsely accused,
Right.
you bear an incredible responsibility to it, and it's something that you should, as a prosecutor, appreciate, and you should, as a judge, appreciate. But until you're doing it, you don't get the full force of it. And I actually have welcomed that responsibility more because it can be incredibly gratifying to help someone who maybe either made a mistake or maybe was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and someone who's inherently good who just had a bad day, or someone who did a really bad thing, and you're trying to make sure that the system does the right thing. So the transition was okay. I was in private sector, like in the corporate world, for a little bit before I started doing some defense work, and it can be rewarding, but I think dealing with people on one way or another is when you're helping people, is what attracts me to law more than anything. So you can help people no matter what hat you're wearing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it brings me back to episode 2 of this podcast. We had Jack on, class of 76, and he dons a line of giving to one is like receiving for two. And I'm pretty sure I got that verbatim, but giving back to one is you receive for two. So
Sure.
And that is kind of the same idea that you just mentioned there, where you being involved with people in any walk of the world of law or business or students or collegiate life, whatever it may be, you being around those people are what inspires you. It sounds like what gets you up, in the morning to go be so active and so busy still at this portion of your career.
Yeah, exactly. Helping, when you feel good about it, you feel like you have a purpose when you can see the impact of the work that you're doing as an attorney, how it helps someone. And that sometimes, depending on the circumstances, it just manifests itself in a hug, like literally an unexpected hug. I've had that. Like it's easy, I guess, to describe it if I'm dealing with the family of someone who was murdered, and
Right.
at the end of it, justice is served. They'll come up and they'll give you a hug, and that's, obviously that's understandable. But it's also, again, the same when you're a defense attorney or in private practice, and you help someone or a family who's been through something terrible, and at the end of it, they come up and they give you that "I'm sorry, is it okay if I hug you?"
Right.
And you're like, yeah, bring it in, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
And that's a sense of community that I think people probably don't realize is such a big portion of it, right? So you're sitting on the bench. How long did you serve up as the judge?
7 years.
7 years. So 7 years as someone who's bearing responsibility for an entire area. You have to come across loads of people and organizations and different types of people who are looking to you for the truth, right? Looking for justice, et cetera. So what was that community aspect like, and what things in your life kind of helped prepare you for that portion of the job, if you will?
That was a little more difficult because you're the judge, you're the referee,
Right.
So you have to keep arm's length in a lot of situations. striving to just do what the law says should be done and keeping the attorneys accountable for doing it the right way is the challenge in itself. And it's funny, when I was appointed to the bench, a friend of mine arranged for me to have lunch with a judge who had retired a couple of years. He was well into his 80s, and he was an absolute gentleman. And I had this great lunch with him. And I remember him asking me, he goes, I understand you played football. And I said, yes, sir. And he goes, do you remember the refs? And I said, I remember a couple of bad ones. And he goes, don't be remembered as a judge.
Wow.
And I look at him, and he goes, just do what you're supposed to do. It's not about you. He goes, a really good judge is like a really good ref. You shouldn't get noticed. And I took that, and it kind of sunk in. I'm like, he's absolutely right. If you make it about you, then it should be about what happened. It should be about the facts. It should be about whether the law is applied correctly. It shouldn't be about your ego or what you want to see happen. And I tried to hold on to that when I was on the bench. And then there are times, like there was this one young woman came into my courtroom, and we gave her a program. And if she was able to finish the program in 6 months, then we would knock down her charge to a misdemeanor. And it was a felony. I think she was selling drugs. And then if she went another 6 months, then the charges would be dismissed. And the district attorney's office was willing to do it, but a little cautious, so I kind of talked them into it. And we interviewed her, and I sat in on it. And she came out with flying colors. And then she came back to my courtroom every couple of months. And then she came back with her daughter. And then she came back with her husband and her daughter. And then she came back and said that she had just finished college. And she felt she owed me this debt of gratitude, but I used to keep, and she would just come in and just wait to see me. And then, she came in with the baby once, so I came in, and I was like, in that one, the case is over, so I came down and I gave her a hug, and she would always say, she goes, you're the one who took a chance on me. She goes, you're the one who would thank. I'm like, no, you just thank yourself. I said, you're the one who did it. We just saw it. We saw it. We saw the glimmer. I said, you're the one who shined it up. So it's stuff like that can be, again, it's rewarding because you see the results of it.
Yeah, those two incredible tidbits. I'm still blown away by the referee analogy from the former judge that you spoke to, because that's an incredible way to look at it, and probably really difficult, I imagine, for some lawyers who get the chance to become a judge because they're outstanding at what they do, right? And when you're outstanding at what you do, sometimes you have to make things about yourself in some ways. And obviously, the gray area of what we're talking about with being a lawyer kind of could change what that means, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So to hear that and for you to still carry it with you to this day, I mean, it just hit me pretty hard. I'm sure it hit you hard then and still does. But then to that next part of the story there with the woman, like that's what I was referring to with the community. Right? It's something that you'll never expect, I guess, of the rewarding part of that job. Because I'm sure there's many of days that you were, I wouldn't use the word miserable because that's the wrong connotation, but beaten because you're dealing with such stressful situations where it feels like there's all losers at the end of the day, because even the victims, if they won the case, still had to deal with the problems that led to the case, right? Or the backfire from that led to the case. So those stories, I'm sure, helped kind of push you through some of the tough days, I imagine.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. But moving on to some of the stuff now that you've traveled with here. I know we're getting a little bit short on time here, but I would be regretful to miss some of the stuff that you've done outside of, in the courts. And then we talked about the private sector already. You traveled the world now at this point, sharing some of the knowledge that you have. You've been, like I mentioned before, in Sweden, in the Netherlands, in Mexico, talking to people to share what you do and what you know best. And when those things started coming into your life, those opportunities came into your life, what did that mean to you, and what excited you about those opportunities?
Well, I would be dishonest if I didn't say, like, the first times you get hit with that, you're literally like, I'm still the Farrell kid who's, and I'm sitting there going, I can't believe like holy cow. I remember when I was a prosecutor, and I was asked to consult on the Kobe Bryant rape case, because the town that it happened in and the county that it happened in is up in the mountains.
Right.
And the prosecutor at that time was friends with a friend of mine, and maybe did not have as much experience in a high-profile rape case. And I remember getting the call and trying to help with, with the mutual friend and offering what I can, and seeing the discovery and going through it with them in the strategy meetings. But I remember the first time I come home and I'm like, this is an international case. So it does. It's you're still yourself.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You still probably watch Kobe win the finals MVP, or he didn't win at that point yet, but you know what I mean?
Right.
You knew who he was. He wasn't like some stranger to you.
And then another time, I one of the things, this it's a funny story. My grandmother's from Italy, and I prosecuted a woman, and it received like an unbelievable amount of press. She starved her son to death, and it was her defense, and it was the offered defense at trial that it was a thing called failure to thrive, which is where the baby breastfeeding doesn't properly latch on,
right,
and the mother doesn't notice, and the baby can lose weight and become either ill or die. And we clearly saw that was not the case. So that was the theory of our prosecution, my prosecution. The baby was a big, fat, healthy 8+ pounds when it was born, and it died at like 4 pounds 9 ounces in 2 months. And it was emaciated, and that case received such an enormous amount of press, and it was literally headlines in the Daily News, the Times, every news station. And the night before we picked the jury, the New York Times put out an op-ed about the persecution of the defendant, not the prosecution. So we were the bad guys. The prosecutors were looked at as the bad guys. 2020, in one of their pieces, interviewed her and interviewed the defense attorney. The defense attorney is a phenomenal attorney. And she was on TV, and the woman was all made up and propped up and said her thing, was crying. And I knew what happened. She had made statements to the boyfriend who left her while she was pregnant that she's going to get him and she'll take care of the baby in a threatening manner. We knew what was behind it. She was evil, and she was not going to care for the child because he left her. But in this interview, she came across extremely likable, and as being wrongly prosecuted. And I called my grandmother the next day, and I said, "Hey, Nana, how are you? Did you see the TV?" She goes, "Yeah." And then she asked me in Italian, which I'm blanking on the expression, "Perché fatta," I think, or something like, she probably, "Why do you do this to this little girl?" I'm like,
oh my gosh.
I'm like, "Nana, why you do this to me?"
Yeah, right. Now you're crushing me.
Right. So we had not released the pictures of the child because you can't.
Right.
So the day we put the pictures of the baby in evidence, it was like one of those old movies. People ran out of the courtroom. There were people crying in the courtroom. People ran out, like the press calling. And I'll never forget, there was a pause, and there was a guy from Channel 2 leans over the well. And he goes, "Mr. Holdman." I said, "What?" He goes, and he points to the press that's sitting in the first 2 rows. He goes, "We owe you an apology." I said, and I shook his hand because he extended his hand. I said, it was Lou Young from Channel 2. And I said, "Thank you, Mr. Young." I said, are you going to do the apology? And he goes, "Oh, no. And he smiled, like to his credit. He was like, "No, we can't do that.
No,
case isn't over yet."
Yeah.
So he was an absolute gentleman.
Yeah. Another lesson there too, right?
Right, but you get blasted. And I remember being out with friends, and I get a phone call from a friend who lives in Seattle. And he goes, "Listen," he goes, "Are you hanging in there?" I said, "Yeah, why?" And he said, "I just turned on CNN." He goes, "And at 6 o'clock, the first 3 names I hear are Clinton, Milosevic, and Holdman." And he goes, "What's going on down there?"
Wow.
I'm like, yeah. I said, and I was, the president of Now actually called me a racist, misogynist pig on CNN, or one of the stations.
Probably doesn't feel great to hear that.
Right. So once the evidence came out and she was convicted of killing her child, you had a little bit of, again, you can't wallow in it as a prosecutor. You have to just do your job, and you can't speak to the press. But it was funny, I remember being out with some of my college and high school buddies, and we'd be just out at a bar, out at a restaurant, and one of my knucklehead friends trying to chat up some girls. Yeah, my buddy's prosecuting that big case with the starved baby, and he gets some woman coming at me with, "You don't know what it's like to breastfeed," and yelling at you. And this is all before it really happened. So kind of asked my buddies not to spread it around when I was there.
Yeah, let's keep that private for now. No, I mean, and another part of that jumps out to me when you tell that story goes back to the referee thing, right? Like, you doing your job to the best of your ability down the line the way the law is supposed to be done, right, is at the end of the day why you're able to put your head on your pillow at night, right? Because you were doing your best job to the best of your ability regarding the law and the information that you had available. And this outside noise is probably putting loads of pressure on you externally, if you will. And the press isn't going to write the apology column because they're not going to get the clicks on the clicks, for lack of a better term.
Right.
They're not getting the good press on the apology column as they are on the hit piece.
Right.
And all those factors can weigh on someone in your position. And what do you do? Maybe it's your family, maybe it's some hobbies. What do you do yourself personally outside of just doing your best to the best of your ability to keep those things separate and not let the external forces push on you too much?
In dealing with that stuff, I think it's part of your makeup. It's part of my background that started at Farrell. It's, like you said, your parents raise you a certain way, and you get a foundation at a place like Farrell, and it's not always easy to do the right thing.
Right.
It's not. And I used to use this line in court. Like a guy would come in and maybe he was supposed to do X, Y, and Z, and we won't put him in jail, and he did X and Y. And then the defense attorney would be, doing his job and trying to say, yeah, but he did this, this, and this. And I'm like, you don't get extra points in life for doing what you're supposed to do. And I used to say that, you don't get extra points. That's what you're supposed to do. So don't try to curry favor for doing what you really should be doing all along. I think that stuff is grounded on my obviously my parents, my family, the core values that I learned here at Farrell, and you try to hang on to them and surround yourself with that. Trying to separate it, that's not always as easy. I'll tell you this one story. I prosecuted a case which there's two little girls, they were 7 and 5, were repeatedly raped by their step-grandfather over a course of months and months. And as we prepared for trial, they would come in and talk to me, and I established a really good relationship with them. And as we were getting closer, the younger one was getting better, and the older one was actually pulling away from me. And I couldn't figure out why. And finally, we're sitting in my office, this is the day before we go to trial, and she's just kind of shutting down, and her name was Tay-Tay, and I go, Tay-Tay, I said, I know you don't want to be here. And she kind of looks up at me, and I said, I know. I said, and that's okay. I said, that's not your fault. And her head snapped up and looked at me, and I go, and I realized, and I said, sweetie, none of this is your fault. And so her eyes got really big and really wet, and then I go, none of it is. And she just explodes. And she just sobs in my thing. She was upset because she hadn't protected her little sister. And then she let it all out. So we kind of got past it, talked to her, the therapist came, and went to trial. She was a champ, she did great, prosecuted the guy, convicted him, and it's kind of a tradition in some of the prosecutor's office or in any office. You have a victory, you go and have a drink with, colleagues. And so that night we did, and everything was great. So 2 or 3 weeks later, I'm on a date. And it's my second or third date with the girl at the time. And we went to go watch a movie called Good Will Hunting. And there was a scene in that movie in which Robin Williams and Matt Damon have, in essence, the same conversation. And I'm sitting there watching. I'm like, this just happened. He keeps saying to Matt Damon, it's not your fault. I know. And then he explodes. I mean, it was literally like they stole it from my life a couple of weeks earlier. And I remember and it hit me. Like, I was fine when I was with her, and I was fine with our child, but I'm sitting there on this date, and all of a sudden I start to get welled up. And I'm like, I'm going to go get popcorn. I'll be right back. And I go up to the bathroom, and I just let it go.
Wow.
I just had to let it go.
Where art becomes life in that way, or life became art for you, I guess, in that moment. That's,
throwing water.
You want more butter on the popcorn?
Yeah, exactly. I'll be right back.
This is not supposed to be a crier, but Good Will Hunting is on the fringe there, actually, has some moments on that. That is... That's an incredible story. And thank you for sharing all that you've done so far. We are coming up to the end of this interview, but I do have a few more things that I want to get to really quickly here. So your involvement has been well noted. You love Monsignor Farrell High School. You come back, you talk to the teams, you talk to parents, you talk to students of all kinds, giving advice for future aspiring lawyers. You also once were the keynote speaker at Commencement, at graduation. Was that your nephew's year, by the way? Is that when you did it, or you did it a different year?
No, okay. I did come back to give him his diploma, but no, it wasn't his. It wasn't my nephew's senior year.
Now, when you were asked or given the opportunity to do that keynote speaking, did you know right away the angles you wanted to take on the advice you wanted to give on everything? Like, did you have a vision of what you would say when you get up there, and what was that all like?
No, I'll be honest with you. I was absolutely. As many trials I'd done or lectures I was done, I don't know if I was ever as nervous addressing someone going into it, because it was Farrell, and I was like, holy crap, Christmas. I'm like, what am I going to do? And part of the thing that calmed me down was my wife was there with my son, who is now 18, and she was holding him. So, whatever many years ago, and it got quiet when I got introduced, and then he yelled out, Daddy, or something like that, totally. He's a baby, but it still didn't fit.
Right.
And I just stopped, and it kind of settled me. But
snapped you in.
Yeah.
As a brand new father, I'm thinking of that concept, right? Of seeing him out there and kind of locking you in. Saying, I got
and
this.
that's exactly I'm like, look at him.
That's really cool.
I can do this. This is easy.
Well, we are thrilled every time we get to see you. Part of the original board of trustees here at Monsignor Farrell's. You've given the amount of time, treasure, and talent you've given to this place. You say you can't pay us back. We feel the same to you, and thank you for being here again today. Now, the last question, which I ask every guest, you're the third guest on this podcast, it's about Vir Fidelis. So I will ramble on for a second while you can think about exactly how you want to word this answer, though I don't think you'll have an issue. So I ask every guest about the term Vir Fidelis, and I want to know, when you hear that, Vir Fidelis, obviously it means faithful men, but what does the term Vir Fidelis mean to Judge Robert Holdman, class of 1982?
Honestly, at this point in my life, if I hear that term, because there are times when you hear that term outside of Farrell, that term actually gives me comfort, because it's home. Like, it's goodness to me. Like, everything that it's supposed to stand for, being a faithful man and being a good Christian and doing the right thing, of course, is true. But at this point, having, been 40 years since graduation, or whatever it may be, 45 years, that's what it means to me. Like, if I'll just see it in some kind of writing or some kind of piece, I smile, because it's a comfort to me. Like, that's us.
That's a good answer. I haven't heard that one yet either. Mm-hmm. So we have three guests. We had Kenny White, great basketball player here, coaching down at Georgetown now. Mm-hmm. Jack Ohm, and now you. And you all had three different, beautiful answers to what Vir Fidelis means to you. And it's a great tradition I look to keep going on this podcast, because I feel like it is one of those things that maybe as you graduate and move on through life, you don't think of the term Vir Fidelis often. Now, I work here full time. I hear it all the time, and I see it all the time. So it's top of mind to me. But when you don't live and breathe 24/7 at 2900 Amboy Road, you might not think of it. So when you see it or hear it,
it brings you back
right to home. That was really good. Judge, thank you so much for doing this. Judge Robert Holdman, class of 1982, 86 Fordham undergrad, 91 Fordham Law. what an honor to sit here and talk to you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The football team is lucky to get to hear from you soon, as well as the parents.
I think they're
Thanks
doing well without me, so it's thus far. I hope I don't spoil it.
So far, so good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Signing off for the Alumni Stories, the podcast. My name is Peter Kennedy, Class of 2012, Director of Alumni Affairs. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Subscribe to our channel to keep up with more stuff that we'll be doing with more alumni and their great stories. Thank you, and Vir Fidelis.